and Erin Brady, our speaker, is a guest. But I think everybody else is part of the team here. So to start our meeting, I'm asking Pastor Paul if he'll give us a Rotary Minute. Paul?
Well, thank you, Sally. And fitting to have this opportunity this morning. I often reflect when we talked about Rotary on my first experiences with Rotary International, which took place fair distance from here when I was growing up in Oklahoma. My father was active in Rotary, and as I've shared the story often with you, when I was a teenager, my father would occasionally invite me to attend a Rotary meeting with him, if he thought I might have some interest in the subject matter. And because at that point in my life, had become very interested as a teenager and a young man in political goings on and public life. He would invite me when the local Rotary Club was hosting a visit from a local public official. And I remember at the time thinking how important it was for that kind of interaction to happen between community leaders and their representatives in the state or federal legislature. And so how fitting it is that I am sharing those memories on a day when we're being joined today by one of our state representatives. And so that great tradition of that important contribution that Rotary makes, among so many contributions that Rotary makes to our communities, by facilitating these kinds of interactions between the public and those who represent them, is happening even this morning. So I celebrate that grand tradition of Rotary, remembering that actually that was how I was introduced to Rotary as a young man a long time ago, in a place far, far away.
In a universe far, far away, right? Thank you, Paul. It is a great tradition in Rotary, and I hope Rotary celebrates all political views because we are friends, because we are co-workers or co-volunteers. We all know that it doesn't matter what our personal politics are because our mission is the same. So thank you very much, Paul. And our inspiration will come from Vince today. Vince?
Thank you, Sally. So since my last name is Conti, and one of the definitions of Conti is fable, I'm actually going to provide you a short fable this morning. It's called The Grateful Starfishes, and it's about attitude. One morning, an elderly man was walking along the beach when he noticed a young boy picking up something off the sand and throwing it back into the sea. As he got closer, the man realized the child was throwing stranded starfishes that washed up on shore back into the breaking waves. Approaching the boy, the man asked what he was doing. The starfish will die if they're still on the shore when the sun rises, said the boy. Perplexed, the man said, but that's pointless. There are countless miles of beach and thousands of starfish. It doesn't matter how many you return to the water, you can't make a difference. Unfazed, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the sea. It matters to this one, said the boy. So the moral of the story is, no matter the odds of success or the scale of the challenge, your actions can make a difference. It's better to light a candle than curse the dark. Every little bit counts. Do something to make a positive change is always better than nothing.
Thank you, Vince.
Right.
That was wonderful.
Thanks.
And also out of the mouths of babes, right? Oh my goodness. Thank you. So I want to do just a couple of business things and then we'll have our speaker. I got my update on Bill Skiff, so thank you very much. Just a reminder to all of you, starting next week, our meetings in February are lunch meetings. If you can come at 11:15 and help set up the room, that would be great. We will have lunch at 11:45 and we'll start the meeting at 12 and we'll end at 1. So those of you who have to get in and get out for your work, we will try very hard to make that hour work. But for the whole month of February, meetings will be at lunch and then back to breakfast in March. I'm just really excited about the new members we're bringing into the club. You will see soon, you will see Eric Barbic from NBT Bank join, Erin Pond from Community Bank. Jen is going to join us as officially as a member. And Rachel Desatel, who's the executive director of Girls on the Run, is going to also join us. I have another couple of friends who, when they get back from their 2-month holiday, will be joining the club. So we're probably going to need to set up another table at breakfast, but we'll see. So it's good news. I'm reminding you that our next blood drive is March 4th. I'm going to contact the Red Cross and get posters for it. But please, if you have friends that you know would be willing to give, tell them that Saturday, March 4th is our next blood drive date. And hopefully sign up for yourselves. I personally haven't yet, but I'm going to sign my husband and I up March 4th for donating blood. And the last thing I want to say, I'm sorry he's not here, is thank you to Andy Michael, who's taken over the fundraising gang, and they are meeting. So we are beginning to find ways to make money, sponsorships, keep our programs going. So that's all good news. Does anybody else have any announcements they want to make before we start in?
It would be great if people would mute their microphone if they're not speaking. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joanna. Yes, Jeannie.
Speaking of the fundraising, I just wanted to let everyone know that when I picked up the mail at the P.O. box, there was a $1,000 check from the Erdman Cole Charitable Funds Foundation, which is the people who donated to us last year as a result of the thank you notes that we did to Williston Central School. And with all the publicity that they've seen, I'm sure that Rotary is continuing to do such great work. They've contributed again this year. So I just wanted to share that because it was they're not members, but they are people in the community who appreciate what we do.
Thanks, Jeannie, for letting us know. That's great news, especially because they weren't solicited for it.
Right?
How nice. Wonderful. Great. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, Ted, you're welcome to introduce our speaker.
Great. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Our speaker today is Representative Erin Brady. Erin has served our community in many profound and important ways. Probably one of the best examples is that she's been a high school teacher for, I believe, over 16 years. She's been a member of the Champlain Valley School District Board. She was elected to the legislature, I believe 2 terms ago. Actually, I've kind of lost track. But Erin serves on the House Education Committee, where she gives her intimate knowledge of educational issues at play for policy. She's the vice chair this year. In the past, she has advocated for early childhood and post-secondary opportunities for children. She worked hard to have a balanced and transformative state budget last year. And she worked hard to make sure that there was a Vermont child tax credit and universal school meals. So she is here today to give us a bird's eye view of what's going to be happening in the legislature this year, and to give us an education on where policy stands. So I give you Erin Brady.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. I will jump in with sort of what I think is happening from my little corner and perspective in the legislature, and then really would love to answer questions and, curious what is on. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear from folks in the community and, what is on your mind, what issues are you following most closely. as Ted's introduction noted, education is obviously my passion, absolutely my passion, and becoming my area of expertise at the legislature. So I would say, you know, this is my second term, but because of the tremendous amount of turnover this year, somehow, if you've been there more than a year, you're relied upon as if you're a long-term veteran now. So it's been a really different experience and pace this year already. Partially as being asked to be vice chair, which has been really very humbled to be vice chair of the House Education Committee. But the pace is it's all different when you actually sort of know what's going on, or know that every single conversation might lead to something. And it is such a relational business. This is the first time for me that I started in person. It was the first day of the session for me. Our first year was entirely on Zoom. Last year we started on Zoom, slowly made our way into the building. So this year started off what, you know, Terry and Joanna know as normal. So a lot of pomp and circumstance. And my sense is there's just an almost extra amount of energy in the building from a lot of new members who are, you know, energetic, enthusiastic, and just starting in person from the beginning. It feels like the momentum at the beginning of a marathon is particularly we're really buzzing with energy this time. I am mostly focused on education issues, and I'm fortunate that I'm on the education committee so that I can have a front seat to those discussions and trying to drive that agenda. My biggest priorities remain children and families. I think on a meta level, everything we do at the earliest ages is going to be some of the most important policy and investments we can make, and have the most impact downstream. And obviously research bears that out, and the tremendous importance of the early years. So to that end, priorities for me this year, Ted indicated it a little bit, but making universal meals permanent is a very, very high priority for me in schools. Yesterday felt a little bit like I like the starfish story. A lot of time in the legislature feels like you're on the beach with starfish and you can keep throwing forever, but it's hard to tell if you will make a difference. It's a really profound experience, I think, of all day you have so many folks coming to you, advocacy groups, constituents, with so many genuine problems and challenges. Generally, most people are coming, you know, because there's something they want to fix or change. And there's only so much that we can do. And so finding that balance of sort of almost being overwhelmed at times, I think, with all the problems that you want to fix and solve, and not lose sight of a bigger picture and some hope, and that throwing a few starfish back in is going to make a difference. So yesterday was a really remarkable experience in our committee, in that we had a lot of folks coming back in to testify about the impact of keeping universal meals in schools last year. And it was a sort of success story. We threw the starfish back in and it made a difference. And it doesn't happen that often. It certainly doesn't happen that quickly either, that you can make policy in 1 year and have right away folks coming back to you and able to report back on that. So the Universal Meals Program, I think, is just such a wonderful success story. And it's not, I jumped in and became a huge supporter of it, but it wasn't my idea by any means. But the notion that we feed all kids in schools, and we treat them the same. We treat them the same when it comes to almost everything else in schools. So we don't stigmatize, we don't ask for information about their background. We just feed all kids in schools. And for many schools, this has meant some really tremendous innovative things happening around food systems too. Some of our districts are now spending doing up to 25% of their menus on local foods. I'm not sure exactly where we are in Williston in terms of local food purchasing. I'd love to connect with Scott, but there's some really great stuff happening around the state in terms of the quality of food using local foods. And as a high school teacher, I also see it, a lot of my students wouldn't qualify financially even before we made meals universal, and only certain income thresholds made it. But it has a tremendous impact on so many students. At Colchester High School, where I teach, we start at 7:45 in the morning. Our students who are coming in from the islands get on the bus at 6:15 in the morning. They're usually not eating breakfast before school. It's tremendously early morning for them. So there's a lot of reasons it is so helpful for kids beyond just the economic need. So yesterday we got to sort of hear, yes, it's working, and all right, get it done, bring it to the finish line. And that's what I'm working on now. Obviously, with a lot of people, nothing happens in isolation in the legislature, but we're hoping to introduce the bill later this week. And it's been wonderful to see the way communities have generally been very positive towards it. And that, I think, has pushed leadership towards accepting that this is a priority. And I'm pretty confident that it will pass and that it will be approved by the governor. So we'll continue working on universal meals and try to get that program to the finish line, and that will just become part of what we do in schools. We'll be one of 3 or 4 states that does it, and a lot of states are looking to us. In fact, one of the things we heard in testimony yesterday was that the way we structured it in order to maximize federal dollars too is really, a lot of states are interested in how we've done that, and looking to us as an example. And I have to note that Honora Horton, who is a Williston resident here, the director of Hunger Free Vermont, a lot of it honestly is her work and her research and her deep knowledge of child nutrition and policy. And she's really just crafted something so thoughtful here, and it's been wonderful to work with her. Other priorities for me in a dream world would be truly universal pre-K, and then we would make sure that all kids could be in a full-time pre-K program. It was public, and I've talked before about some of my biggest concerns about education are sort of the bookends of our system. We tend to have a very well-funded system of K-12 in Vermont, although the cracks are starting to deepen in some of the challenges, and I'll talk about that in our K-12 system. But we really, I think, could stand to invest much more heavily in pre-K. Luckily, maybe childcare is going to be a top priority for the whole legislature. It's a priority for the Democratic caucus. It's a priority for a lot of business leaders. The study that we commissioned a couple years ago about what would it really cost and how would you go about having a truly universal childcare system in the state where every child who needed a spot had one and had access to high quality care. No family paid more than 10% of their income, and childcare workers were paid a livable wage. That study has come back. It is not surprisingly expensive. There's a lot to be worked out about what the path forward may be. That likely won't come, for the most part, through the Education Committee. That will be through Human Services. So I don't have a ton of inside knowledge on that one, other than I think it's going to force us to really ask the question about pre-K and sort of where does that fall. There's a lot of support for just saying, bring that into the K-12 system. It's pre-K to 12, make that part of the Ed Fund public school, put it in that, and make childcare, deal with childcare as everything up to that. We will see where that goes, but I think it's an opportunity for us, hopefully, to really talk about pre-K. On the other end of the sort of bookends of education, my other really strong interest, I have this folder in my Google Drive called long game policy work. These are the things I have to remind myself. I'm going to be throwing starfish for a really long time, but it's important work. Is post-secondary options and access for our graduates, and making sure that our 12th graders graduate and go on to a productive next step. Does not have to be college, but it's a deliberate step. It's something moving them towards a career that's going to allow them to be financially secure and going to be important for the overall economic health of our state. We just have far too many of our students kind of vaporizing or floating a lot after graduation, part-time jobs, not really moving constructively towards a next step. And a lot of them qualify for a lot of aid, but it's tremendously hard for students to navigate. This one's a particular personal passion for me because I teach mostly high school seniors, and I end up trying to sort of personally shepherd a couple kids every year, but I just see the amount of need in how to figure out if I want to become a welder, or if I want to go to CCV, or I want to go to St. Mike's, or I don't even know that I want to go to St. Mike's because that's never been discussed at home. How you begin to allow students to, one, have the sort of identity that they see they could do that, and then can navigate the process. It's just so much navigation, and high school counselors can't do that enough one-on-one for 350 plus kids. So how we really better capture our graduates and make sure that they are productive, that they're going on to solid next steps, and hopefully then choosing to stay in Vermont and raise families here and help the demographic trends that are our constant challenge. In the Education Committee this year, The one really interesting, I think, thing that we're going to be dealing with that I underestimated is the ramifications of Supreme Court decisions. And this one, I don't know everybody's background here, so I know some of you are lawyers and probably know this far better than I do. But there have been a lot of decisions that will have far-reaching impacts recently. But one that's going to have a really far-reaching, potentially really far-reaching impact for Vermont was a case called Macon v. Carson, dealing with the tuitioning system in Maine. And I've always been somewhat aware of this issue, but I think as a person in Chittenden County, we're in a community that has a high school. The dynamics of tuitioning and school choice were not as clear to me as they are quickly becoming. So we have a system in Vermont where we have a lot of small towns. We have towns that don't have physical school buildings, whether it's a high school or even an elementary school. And it's the town's obligation by our constitution to educate the students in their community. And so we have a system of tuitioning students to other schools or other towns. And the system we have in Vermont, I'm learning a lot this week, really changed pretty dramatically in the early 1990s when the 4 historic academies, St. Johnsbury, we'll see if I get them all, St. Johnsbury, Lyndonville, Thetford, and Burton, went from being a sort of public schools, though they never had school boards. They were governed a bit differently, but they were public schools. They had been chartered by the legislature, and became private. And there have been a growing number over the last 20 years or so of independent schools popping up in Vermont, and going through a process, I would say questionably how rigorous process, but process at AOE to become an independent school that could receive public funds. And so I think it's been a slow, nobody's necessarily, well, I shouldn't say nobody, some people know this very closely and have been watching it, but it's been hard from the public view, I think, to see how much this landscape has shifted in Vermont, that at the same time we've had declining enrollment, we've had a little bit of an increase in independent school enrollment, and we have parts of the state where independent schools have become more of a draw, and that has had a really challenging effect on the public schools in those communities. If a few students choose to take their tuition dollars to an independent school and the public school has to start to make cuts, then more families will choose the independent school. It sort of starves the local public school. And philosophically, I am absolutely a passionate supporter of public schools. And I think that we need to do anything. Our public dollars should go to public schools, and we need to prop up our public schools. They're for everyone. The big concern right now with some of our independent schools is enrollment and what students do they serve. And if they do not or cannot serve students, particularly with higher needs, then do those students become concentrated in other schools, and the needs become much more intense in your public school. It can have, obviously, it's then a negative impression of public opinion of that school. It isn't a truly heterogeneous student population. We're starting to sort of segregate kids by school choice. So it's the Supreme Court case basically said to Maine, Maine has a similar system to Vermont with some differences, but in Maine, a family wanted to take their tuition dollars to a religious school, and the Supreme Court and the state of Maine said, no, you can't use your dollars for that. This is the case that ended up there, and the Supreme Court's essentially said, if you're going to have choice at all, if you're going to give them tuition, you can't restrict where it goes. It can go anywhere. So this is probably going to have some really far-reaching implications for the Vermont tuitioning system. And I underestimated, I think, how complex this is. As the independent schools, particularly the historic academies, have become more powerful and independent, how resistant they are to any change or becoming quasi-public again. So it's going to be a really challenging issue. It's a really dense policy issue. It's going to be challenging because it doesn't really divide on party lines so much as a lot of geographic lines. Some of the independent schools have a pretty strong lobbying. St. Johnsbury Academy, which is a wonderful institution, but has a tremendous lobbying force behind it. Our public schools don't have that. So it's an interesting situation to navigate, and we're only there for a few months, and we're trying to learn all the ins and outs of constitutional law. So that one is to me, rises to the top of sort of the most interesting, challenging thing that the Education Committee in particular, and eventually probably the full body, will have to deal with. In terms of the full body, the other, you've probably seen in the news, the other priority for the Democratic caucus is paid family and medical leave. I'm happy to support that bill. It falls very much in my philosophy of we have to support families, we have to support working families in particular. So to create a truly universal program where any worker, part-time workers, can access leave when they need it. The lesson we hopefully learned from the pandemic, that when people are sick, they need to be able to stay home. And if they can't afford to, they're going to make difficult choices. And those choices might have implications for public health and society. So there's that aspect, as well as just the doing right by our babies, and that when a new child is born or adopted or comes into a family and a new family is formed, those early months of bonding are so tremendously important for a lifetime of development. And so making sure that we allow new families to be able to stay home and have that time and space is so tremendously important for us as a society. So I'm excited to support that policy. It won't come through my committee, but I imagine it will become a fairly large topic point of the session, because it will cost something and there will be disagreement about that, as is everything that costs something. I could keep going on, but I'd love to just answer questions or hear what issues people are most interested in, or if I talked about something that you want me to explain in more detail, I'd be happy to do that.
Great. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand. I think Erin can see your name on your
Yes.
box. And so if you have a question for her, please just raise your hand. Wow.
I see Greg. I see Greg's
There we
blue
go.
hand.
Hey, Erin. First of
Hello.
all, thanks for all the work you are doing. I just wanted to ask, and maybe you don't know this yet,
Yeah.
when the conversations are around universal pre-K and
Yeah.
potentially pulling pre-K into public and thinking pre-K 12, are they talking 3 and 4-year-olds or 4-year-olds, or have they not gotten to that grain size yet?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'd be curious. Do you have a thought on that, or a reason to go one way or the other?
I mean, not particularly. I mean, from a perspective of a 2-year relationship is always really
Right.
powerful. So if
Yeah.
we can pull that 3-4 kind of multi-age lens to it, also it might help smaller communities establish enough of a group. But there are other challenges in terms of not having it just one age. I would lean, I guess, to the 3-4.
Yeah. In the pre-K situation, it's a particularly challenging in childcare, because as complicated as our K-12 system is, when you sort of look under the hood about tuitioning and where students are actually going, and independent schools, and some of our money going to schools out of state, some of it going to schools out of the country, our early system is even more complex, because it's very much a mixture of private, there are religious institutions, nonprofits, you've got it in the public schools. It's a very complex system, and I other than having navigated it some as a parent, don't know that some of the policy implications really of how we sort of go from there, if ideally to something more coherent. Without getting into the sort of governance issues, my dream would be, we've got a lot of buildings that are sitting empty around the state, school buildings that are sitting empty, or that may need to close because they're serving such a small number of students. And I in my dream world, we would be able to repurpose some of that and create some regional pre-K centers and regional pre-K resources where we use some of these public assets that are sitting empty. We bring folks into the teacher system in terms of an employment opportunity, which is generally so much better than what our childcare workers are seeing, and that helps grow our economy. But it's much more complicated than that, unfortunately. I see Dave's hand.
I had to unmute. Forgive my not being there visually because I'm having trouble with my camera. But one comment, and that's just you talked about kids in the islands having to get up so early. I now live out in Isle of Mott, so I sometimes am driving in at 6:30 in the morning and seeing school buses heading off to wherever. My question for you is semi-personal, I guess, is how legislators are able to balance their lives between work and family and your jobs as legislators. Do you take a leave of absence for that period while you're in session?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I described the system somewhat to my sister yesterday. I said, I think our family is sort of like Southwest Airlines right now. And and this system it's very fragile and it could go down at any moment. And the whole thing will fall apart. For me personally, as a high school teacher, the way I have been able to make it work is that I've become a 0.6 teacher instead of a 1.0 full-time teacher. And so Colchester High School, then though I'm only 0.6, I teach full-time in the fall semester. So I just wrapped up a week ago. It was a little messy at the beginning of the session because I have 2 weeks where I still have students and we're in session. And I really want to be able to finish in person with my students. So I teach full-time in the fall semester, and then I teach one online class throughout the session that I'm able to do more flexibly that I'm teaching now. I teach an online government class for virtual high school. So that allows me that flexibility to physically be there. And to be frank, also the fact that, I have a 2-income household, and with my husband's support, we can make the finances of it all work together because the legislature does not pay much. And, it's a pay cut to take that reduction in teaching to do it. So it requires sort of an investment on the family level here for us to make these choices and to make it work. And that's true of a lot of folks. Part of, in terms of retirements last year, or folks leaving the legislature, obviously it was a lot of folks who've been there a very long time and were ready to retire and had been really worn down by the pandemic and the back and forth on Zoom. But there were quite a few new legislators, particularly fathers, who said, I can't do this. I can't sustain it financially. I can't sustain the strain on my family. There are increasingly numbers of younger legislators and those of us with kids, some with really little kids. There's a new legislator who has a young baby that she is sometimes has at the State House with her. That it's a real challenge. And there's discussion, I think, around sort of systemic change and what would it mean to be more accessible to more folks, but those will be hard changes. And so it doesn't happen fast. And on a practical level, I commute every day because it's important for me to be home with my family. And but last night's commute was long. It's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of looking at the calendar every Sunday night and saying, okay, can we fill in every single little hole here and make sure our kids aren't home alone or home alone too long and are going to get to all the different places they need to be. So it's a real challenge of service. And I think it's a split. A lot of folks stay in Montpelier. Certainly some are, that would be unrealistic to drive back and forth to Montpelier every day. And then there are a lot of us that commute. And that's a challenge as well in terms of sort of culture. And it's such a conversational business of trying to understand what other people's priorities are, what's happening in different committees. If we can't be there every night to go to dinner at 6 o'clock, missing some of those conversations can be challenging, but there are also, I think, increasing number of legislators really trying to push against a culture where you have to be there 24/7 to have an input in the process. I don't know. I wonder even what Terry and Joanna's experiences were in that regard, but it's certainly a challenge, and I'm fortunate that I've been able to work it out and stay in teaching and do this. People cobble it together a lot of different ways. I see Sherry, the blue hand.
Hi. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for speaking to us today. And I know your focus is on education, so I don't want to get away from that. But I do just want to ask, as a representative for our town, can you direct us in who we might contact and speak with regarding our U.S. Postal Service? I've called Bernie Sanders' office. I've called Becca Balant's office. And even if they are somehow working on anything, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe somehow people could communicate back to us, the community, in some way, if anything's even being done.
I absolutely and genuinely do not know. And I get a lot of emails on this. I wish I had any information or answer for you. I'm in the same position. We get mail very sporadically. I do not know. Obviously, it's a federal agency. It's a federal office. Going through the federal delegation is the right course there. There's really nothing we can do as a state legislature on the issue. And I don't know, I've heard so many different things about what really is the issue. Is it a workforce issue? Is it a Williston specific issue? Is this the long range plans of the Postmaster General? Is it, I do not know. And I hope someday somebody writes some fascinating expose of the whole full story,
But
if there is one.
so
Yeah.
after all this time,
Yeah.
we're talking years at this point, it seems as if I don't know isn't acceptable anymore to the general community.
Yeah.
And we need to know, like, so
Yeah.
who and how can we get answers? Because the I don't know seems, at least if everybody's reading Front Porch Forum,
Right.
that's not flying too well anymore.
Right.
So I don't
As,
think the
as
I don't
Erin
know.
said,
What's
as
that?
Erin said, it's a federal government entity, not state. So as you did, going to Bernie's office and Welch's office and Balance office is the right place to go. Of course, Becca's just getting up and started as a new legislator. But yeah, try Welch's office also.
But what should we be asking for when we reach out to them, other than informing them of a problem that they already know about? And because, you know, the people that are answering the phones, they're just like, oh yes, we've been getting calls on this. How can we push it to, is it just the multitude of calls? Like everybody's going to just call? Or is it that we should be asking for something like answers? Like, I don't know, how hard do we push with each call?
All of the
Yeah. Well, Pastor Paul might have ideas from his Senate days. And before I became a teacher, before I was in Vermont, I worked for a US Senator for 5 years. So this fell into the constituent casework department of any federal representative's work. So the volume absolutely matters. And if somebody can get an in-person meeting with any one of those representatives or their staff, their state director, even if you could get a meeting with the state director of Ballant, Welsh, or Sanders, and try to really impress upon them the gravity of it and the level of frustration, obviously that might help kick things up more than just a lot of calls and emails. And so I don't say I don't know, I mean, to be dismissive. It's tremendously frustrating. And it's frustrating because it is very local, yet it is absolutely completely federal. And there's nothing, there's nothing the state can do or the town in terms of dealing with it. So I would continue to push on the federal delegation, and probably and if you can get some sort of in-person meeting, and I don't think has to be with the member themselves, with like a state director, that might be helpful. It also looks like Heinsberg, finding other communities having the same issue would probably be useful as well in terms of helping them see the magnitude of the problem.
Thank you.
I know it's tremendously frustrating, and it's frustrating to say I don't know to that one.
But again, I don't want to thank you for all you're doing with regards to education.
Oh, no, I understand. This is like day-to-day stuff. Absolutely. Our systems need to work. And I believe strongly that government can be really powerful and effective. So it's very frustrating to sit by and see a division of government be so unsuccessful or so frustrating to people when we often don't have as many interactions, and that people then make assumptions, and it may look bad upon so many other things that are going so well in the public sphere and the ways that we are helping people's lives. So I share the frustration wholeheartedly, and I would keep pushing on the federal delegation.
Sally has her hand up.
Yeah, hi, Erin. I have a comment and then a question. So the comment is in regard to what you were saying about seniors, your frustration around seniors not moving on after high school. And I can do this for you, but Colchester Milton Rotary Club may have scholarships. Our club has scholarships, and we award one scholarship every year to someone going to vocational school. We've awarded $1,000 of tools to someone going into auto mechanic school. Or so if Colchester Milton has scholarships, you might put a bug in their ear that
Sure.
that a technical scholarship would be very much appreciated. So my question is, what is there work being done, and what's the status of it on childcare in Vermont?
There is definitely work being done. The work we did 2 years ago essentially passed a bill that said, one, we aim as a state, like I said before, to have a system that no one pays more than 10% of their income. There's a high quality spot for all children who need one, and our childcare workforce is well paid. And then commissioned a study, which is often with a very part-time legislature where none of us have any staff. So often in legislation, you see these big thorny questions then turn into a study so that there's an opportunity for experts or consultants to come in and really try to get much more in the weeds on what the issue is and what the potential solutions might be. We could talk separately about sort of the merits of that kind of way of legislating versus maybe another, but so we commissioned a very comprehensive study of the Vermont system that just came out last week from the Rand Corporation. And I can send it back in the email chain to Ted to share with folks. And it's certainly public and out there, but just to help you get to the link. So it really went through sort of the system that we have. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What would the cost be? And so there are a core group of legislators working very closely with the Let's Grow Kids campaign and advocates in the field. There are some businesses who are really supportive of this, working on legislation. But again, it's such a complex system. We already have such a complex system of care being delivered in so many different ways. And so it even falls under different agencies at the state. So it's going to be a challenge in terms of how we move forward on it. But our caucus is really committed to, we need to make this investment, that this is an investment that pays dividends in terms of long-term outcomes for young kids when they can be in high quality settings. It helps our workforce, particularly women who left the workforce during COVID, people who want to be able to work more but cannot find childcare. So legislation hasn't been introduced yet, but it's in the works by members of particularly the Human Services Committee with those advocates and with the findings of the study. I think it'll be introduced soon. The feeling I'm getting around the building is that this is a 2-year project. So my sense, if I were to guess, is that we won't see major decisions until next year, but I'm not sure. That's just a guess at this point.
Great, thank you.
We are doing a lot to invest in terms of trying to get more folks going into the early childcare field and make it more affordable. So we did some great stuff in really helping prop up the preparation programs, particularly through the Vermont State University. And so some of these things, these are challenging. It's like a lot of our housing investments. It's going to take a while to see the impact of our actions. And that is another one of them there. There's several critical occupations where we made a lot of investment last year in terms of trying to help prop up our nursing field, our mental health workers, our some of the building trades, and also early childcare. And Vermont State University particularly has been a great partner in that. I'm really interested in continuing to support Vermont State University, make sure that we keep them on a viable path to remain. They are on track to become the first truly hybrid system in the nation. And I have to say, I'm just so impressed with the work of transformation that they've done from what I've seen based on where they were just a couple years ago when it looked like the sky was really falling for the Vermont State colleges. So they'll be an important partner in it, but it will be slow.
Great. Thank you, Erin. And I
Yeah.
see that Angela has put the link up in the chat section. So if anybody needs to look at that,
Yeah,
it's
there you
there.
go. Perfect.
And I think our time is up. Ted, do you want to tell Erin about our speaker support?
Sure. Erin, thank you so much for your presentation today and everything that you do. We consistently give a donation in the speaker's name to the mentoring program at Williston Central. So we're going to be doing that for you. We are out of the home board version game of Rotary, so we can't send you away with that. No consolation prize, but we do have your donation will be made. So thank you very much.
Next week is Mentoring Week. We'll be recognizing it in the legislature. There will be some wonderful advocacy around mentoring at the State House next week. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. It's so great to be able to have our representatives show up at a Rotary meeting. And
Feel
keep
free
us
to send
informed.
questions anytime in between as well. I want to be engaged and really understand, what things people are most interested in. And I know the post office is one of them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.
So we don't have a Sergeant at Arms today, and we're obviously not in person. So all